pleasure today of introducing our speaker, Sheriff Curtis Johnson. I watched a few videos and read some things to get ready to introduce Sheriff Johnson, and a couple things struck me from the videos I watched. First, this is someone who has been in Boulder his entire life, save a short time in college and in graduate school, who's got ties to our community that go all the way back. He was a Fairview graduate. It probably wouldn't have been hard to guess what career he would choose, given that he was a cadet trainee, I guess, at Fairview, even all the way back in high school. And he worked his way all the way through the ranks, from a patrol officer now to sheriff. The other thing that struck me watching the videos and caused me to feel some gratitude for him joining us today is the fact that Sheriff Johnson said one of the hardest parts of the job has been the amount of requests that he gets to come and speak at public engagements in the community. And he identified a few of those just when we were sitting at the table right now, and it sounds like a very busy life. So we're incredibly grateful that you came and joined us today. Please welcome Curtis Johnson.
So I want to be really transparent with you today, because this is one of those events that was mildly unscheduled until last week. And you know, when Chris calls, there's a relationship between the Sheriff's Office and the YMCA, and a relationship that when he called and said, hey, our person backed out next week, could you come talk to Rotary? I want to be very clear, this presentation, the formal part, is going to be a little light on slides. Didn't have a lot of time this week to put a whole bunch of stuff together. And this is my last obligation today before I leave on vacation tomorrow. And so this is a great way to end my week. It's been a heck of a week. And as was alluded to, you know, I often get asked, how's it going? I'm in my third year now as your sheriff, and it truly is an honor and a privilege to serve this community in this capacity. And I tell people this is the busiest, most stressful job I've ever had, but it's also the most fun I've ever had. And I truly enjoy getting up every morning and coming to work. A lot of that's because of the people that I get to work with and the community I get to serve. And it's also because this role to me is critically important in our community. And a lot of people underestimate what truly the responsibilities of the sheriff are. And if you just looking at my week this week, you know, the Sheriff's Office is responsible for providing law enforcement for unincorporated Boulder County. And a lot of people who even live in Boulder County don't realize that our western border is the Continental Divide. Boulder County goes really far west. Our neighbors to the west are Grand County, so if you go to far western Boulder County and climb all the way up and look down, you'll see Fraser and Winter Park. And it is a very interesting community to serve, because we also are the contract law enforcement agency for the town of Superior, the town of Nederland, and the town of Lyons. And so Monday night, I got to spend my evening in Nederland doing just a community forum with the community that we now serve up there, because law enforcement has gotten really complicated and really expensive. And a lot of small communities just cannot afford to have their own police department, because it's an expensive endeavor. And so serving those smaller communities in this capacity is a lot of fun, and it gives our employees an opportunity to work in different parts of the county, in different communities that have different expectations for the way we work with them. Netherlands certainly being on one end of the spectrum with expectations, different, say, than from Superior, who wants to make sure Costco and Target are secure. And so it really has been an awesome experience so far these 3 years. You know, I had a great opportunity presented to me in 2021. I had been with the Boulder Police Department for 27 years. I was a deputy chief, And I had really become frustrated with that work environment. And a friend of mine that I grew up in the police department said, you know, if you're really that unhappy, you should change. And as a supervisor, a leader in the organization, I had always thought that if people are really unhappy with their jobs, you should make a change. And when I was offered the opportunity to join the sheriff's office and eventually run for office, it was a risk, and a risk that was completely worth taking because of where I am today and the experiences that I get to have. And people ask me, you know, what have you underestimated, or how have the first couple of years gone? And true to form, absolutely underestimated the amount of opportunities I get to engage with the community in different things. Because Monday night was Netherland, but Tuesday night was the Latino Chamber and a forum on immigration, and a really good opportunity to understand how our current presidential administration is impacting part of our community. And Wednesday was a Democratic event, and then last night was wildfire mitigation and prescribed burning in Superior, and working with Marshall Fire impacted communities on why and how we need to do prescribed burning to better protect ourselves from the threat of fire. And that other piece of my job beyond the law enforcement, I'm responsible for search and rescue in Boulder County. So anytime one of your out-of-state friends goes up to Chautauqua in flip-flops and decides they're going to scale the first Flatiron and falls down and succumbs to the great thing we know as gravity, my team gets to go pick that up. I also get to be the fire warden in Boulder County. I am not a firefighter by trade, but I am responsible for summoning resources to put out wildland fires throughout Boulder County, which means I also get to employ 16 firefighters that are a part of the sheriff's office that manage that responsibility community-wide. And this time of year are working on fire mitigation. Later in the year, they will be all over the country fighting fire, if not here. And the other great responsibility, and the other thing that I greatly underestimated as a new sheriff, was the amount of time I spend worrying about, thinking about, or dealing with the Boulder County Jail. Again, I have a statutory responsibility to provide a safe and secure jail facility in Boulder County. And what I have is a 37-year-old jail that is smaller than it should be for a county our size, and that is a constant bearer of stress on my life. And now many of you know my predecessor, Joe Pelly, the man who really tapped me to take this job, and I had the wonderful opportunity to be coached and mentored by him to fulfill this position. And he told me early on, as he was retiring and I was starting, he said, "You'll get used to the stress. It's like a low-grade fever you can never get rid of." And in my first 3 or 4 months, I thought, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm having the best time ever. I fully appreciate that statement now, 3 years in. There is this underlying thing that weighs on me every day, and most of it has to do with the fact that I'm responsible for providing housing and medical care and food, as well as programming and trying to get people back into our community to be productive members of our community and hopefully never come back to my jail. All in a building that is, for lack of better words, we put a lot of lipstick on that pig. Just holding it together. So I want to dive in now to a little bit of the slide stuff. If you want to see what the Pelly Center is where we're going to start. So previously known as just the Alternative Sentencing Facility, and forgive me, that's how I know it in my vernacular, as the ASF, soon to be named the Pelly Center in honor of Joe Pelly, thanks to some members of this club and others in the community. This is a project that's really born out of attacks from 2018. But briefly, history lesson, in 2016, there was a ballot measure in Boulder County seeking funding to expand the current Boulder County Jail. And in 2016, that tax measure failed miserably. More than 60% of our community said we don't want to invest money in more jail space, which is indicative of our community. I can respect that. So in 2018, a different tax proposal was brought forward to construct an alternative sentencing facility on the jail campus. It's just east of the jail on Airport Road. And when that passed, it also included funding for jail modernization, which is a tactful way of saying we still have to spend some money on the jail and make it better. But I want to give you an update today on where we're at with the Pelley Center, because since passing a tax in 2018, here we are in March of 2025, and the building is still not yet done. But we're close. And I will share with you that some of those challenges have to do with building anything in the city of Boulder. If any of you own property and have sought permits and process in the city of Boulder, this building was succumbed to that process. But it has been a big lift and a long time coming. And that's a rendering of what the building will look like. If you'll hit the next one. That's where we're at as of Wednesday. The building is coming together nicely. And our time frame for this building is we hope to have a certificate of occupancy by June of this year. So a couple months away. Yes. Go ahead and hit the next one. So, what is the Pelley Center and what is it really going to do? This is a 252-bed facility that is designed for people who have been sentenced. So it will not help me with my pretrial jail population, but it will help people in our community who are serving a sentence. It will house work release, day reporting, community corrections clients, and parolees. So if you're familiar with our community currently, we have 2 halfway houses in Boulder County. There's one in Boulder at 21st and Canyon. It's often known as BCTC, or the Boulder Community Treatment Center. And there's one on Main Street. It's about 200 block of Main Street in Longmont, called the Longmont Community Treatment Center. The challenge with those 2 facilities is that they are owned and managed by third-party for-profit companies. And that does not feel good. As well, they are expensive for us to place people at, and they do not get the supportive services that they need to successfully reenter our communities. As well, those facilities have a contract with the state Department of Corrections to house parolees, people who are transitioning out of the state prison system and have to live in a halfway house environment for a period of time before they gain more freedom. Again, not an appropriate level of support at those 2 facilities. So part of the reason for this structure is to, 1, get out of that prison for profit model, paying a third party to do that work, consolidating all of those services and resources to one building, a new building, with a really strong focus on reducing recidivism. The goal of this facility is to transition people back into the community successfully in a manner in which we hope we never see them again, and that they become contributing members of our community. That comes with challenges, but we are hopeful that in July we can start phasing that opening. The other challenge we have in our criminal justice system right now is, as I kind of alluded to, we don't have a ton of jail space for people to serve sentences. We do have a lot of alternative programming in place now, but we don't have the infrastructure to support it. So take, for example, work release. Someone could get convicted of multiple DUI offenses, and perhaps the judge decides work release is an appropriate sentence, where you're going to maintain your job in the community, maintain your connections in the community, but you're going to spend nights in a facility where you're going to sleep and you're going to get programming, you're potentially going to get substance abuse treatment, counseling, you're going to get other access to programming at night, but we're going to allow you to go to work during the day to maintain your income, maintain some stability in your life. Right now, if I were sentenced to work release today, there would not be a bed available for me in work release until probably July or August. And that creates a problem with sentencing people to work release, because judges are hesitant to sentence somebody if the sentence isn't going to be imposed for 3 months. And that creates a gap in that kind of concluding their criminal justice process. So the first people that will move in to the Pelley Center will be our current backlog of work release clients and our current backlog of community corrections compliance. You might wonder, what's a community corrections client? Community corrections clients are typically people who have committed and been convicted of a felony, but perhaps aren't quite worthy of going to the Department of Corrections yet. They're right on that line. If they violate their community correction sentence, they will go to the Department of Corrections and spend time in prison. But it's an opportunity for them to live in a facility like the Pelley Center and serve their sentence, potentially be able to then start working, potentially be able to generate income so that they can afford housing when they are released. It's a last stop measure before sending somebody to the state prison system. Right now in my jail, I have 11 people waiting to serve a community correction sentence, but we don't have beds for them at BCTC or LCTC. At this facility, we will have beds for them, and they will move in immediately and begin their sentence. The other challenge with the Pelley Center is it was designed pre-COVID. And our criminal justice population has changed since the impacts of COVID. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about the jail, but right now in my jail, over 80% of the people in my jail are pretrial detainees, meaning they've been arrested, but they haven't gone to court yet. They're just in a waiting holding pattern. Pre-COVID, those numbers were about 60%. That takes up space in my facility and limits the number of people I can house in my facility. And that challenge is not going to be fully offset by the Pelley Center. It's going to move a few people out of my jail. It's going to allow some great sentencing alternatives, but it's not going to free up the conditions in the current jail because a lot of people who are in jail aren't eligible to live in the Pelley Center because they haven't been sentenced yet. The other challenge we have is the number of people that we can assign to, for example, work crew. The Pelley Center had a beautiful space set up for us to house our work crew inmates. So those are people serving a misdemeanor sentence in the county jail that are eligible to go out, and you've probably seen them in the community. They oftentimes clean up Boulder Creek, or we have contracts with other communities to go out and put them to work. They get out of the building for the day. They get to do meaningful work in the community while they serve their sentence, and they earn time off for participating in the program. I don't have enough people that have been sentenced to the county jail to support a work crew. And those that have, only about a third of them would be eligible to work out of the building in the community because of the crimes they've committed. So that space in the Pelley Center is not going to be fully activated yet because we don't have the right population to put in that facility. So we are currently working as we continue to design and look at how we're going to staff and fill this building. We're looking at other alternatives on whether we should use that part of the facility as a more intensive mental health treatment facility because it's built in a way that's a little more traditional jail-y. Should we be taking our most severe mental health clients and housing them in that and getting them more specific treatment? And there are a lot of options on the table for how we want to use some of the space in the building that we haven't quite yet. It was designed for one purpose, but that purpose may not serve us this year. By January of 2026, we should have both LCTC and BCTC closed and all of those clients housed in the building, which is a good thing for our community. There will be some logistical challenges. There is some frustration with the fact that not having a facility in Longmont could hinder people who are from Longmont, who have connections in Longmont, from living in Longmont because they'll be living in Boulder. But we're working on transportation plans and options so that if, for example, you are housed in this facility on work release, but your job is in Longmont and you don't have a car, can we get you there to work and maintain those connections in the Longmont community, bring you back at night? So a lot going on with this building. We're almost there. It has been a long time coming, and it will be a wonderful addition to our criminal justice range of options that we have. Go ahead. So jail modernization. That's the other part of the tax that was passed in 2018. And just by a little history, the jail opened in 1987. Now, I graduated from high school in 1987. And between then and now, I have found myself in need of significant repair and a lot of care and maintenance, just like the jail. Currently, our average daily population is not 265 or 285, it's 440. Because that jail was originally designed to be single bunks, very, very progressive jail in the 80s. Not currently, primarily because all those cells have now been double bunked, and we have had to expand and work within the confines of the jail to make more room. And so, for example, work release that used to be run out of the jail and is now farmed out to BCTC and LCTC, the area that we used to house people in there, we had to create more dormitory living for people who aren't eligible for work release. As my jail chief would put it, post-COVID, there are no nice people in our jail anymore. There used to be some decent people who were good inmate workers, were trustees. The population has changed significantly, and that creates a lot of challenges for us. So we built a new administrative wing, and we built a brand new courthouse. Those were completed about 2 years ago on the campus. We're currently building a new booking room. The booking room has not changed since I was arresting people in 1994. It is a tiny space, and we are updating and expanding that on the east side of the jail. But the benefit of this expansion is we will have 60 more beds on the second floor above booking that we can use for intake at the jail. Now, 60 beds may not seem like a lot, but it will make a huge difference in how we can operate that facility, just 60 beds. If I told you I would take 150, that would be great, but 60 is a great start. And it is in line, similar construction timeline as the alternative sentencing facility, the Pelley Center. Should be opening in June-ish as far as being able to occupy the booking room and have that space available. I'm gonna hit the next. That's a picture of kind of where it's at right now. It's really not pretty. It's the east end of the jail, and it's a jail. It's not filled with windows and beautiful facades. Go ahead and hit the next one. So what are the challenges with all of this? First, recent legislation about restrictive housing in county jails. What does that mean? That means everyone who's living in my jail, all 440 of them, or today I think it's about 425, have to be out of their cell for at least 2 hours and 15 minutes a day. And managing that in a facility that was built in 1987 becomes a really complicated challenge. In our bigger modules, where people who tend to follow the rules get to live, getting them out for multiple hours during the day is not a big deal. Where we struggle is, of those 425 that are in my jail today, 50 to 60% of them on any given day have a diagnosed mental illness. And many of them also have substance abuse disorders. And of the 40 or 50% that aren't formally diagnosed, at least half of them have some form of mental illness or substance use disorder, or both. That creates challenges with our population because there are a number of people in my jail that cannot have a roommate. Because if they do, there will be conflict. And one thing you do not want in a jail is conflict. Conflict creates problems and lawsuits. So we have a number of people that have to be housed alone. So for every house alone inmate I have, I lose another bed. So right now, there are about 55 people on house alone, which means 55 other beds that could be used in our community can't. That creates challenges for me managing restrictive housing because I can't let them out with anyone else. So if you can imagine even a module where only 12 cells, 12 people that are all on house alone status and cannot interact with other human beings, how do I get all 12 of them out of their cell for 2 hours and 15 minutes in a 24-hour day? It is nearly impossible. And to meet that, we really have to violate the spirit of the law and give people time out at times that are not really convenient. The purpose of this statute was to allow people to communicate with family, connect with friends. Sometimes your time out might be at 2 a.m. just so I can meet the spirit of the law, or the hard facts of the law, and violate the spirit of the law. So it's a challenging environment to try to keep people, giving them their time out, making sure we're looking out for their rights, but also keeping everyone else in that facility safe from each other. Plumbing. So I mentioned that I've got 60 more new beds coming at the jail. Make sure I'm not cruising by on time. Before I can open those 60 additional beds, I get to do the great plumbing project of 2025. So 3 years ago, we replumbed the main corridors of the jail, the big pipes that feed water into the various parts of the jail. Now, every pipe that leads from a main hallway to each individual cell is leaking. They're 37 years old, they've expanded and contracted over time, and they're finally done contracted. They're just expanded. And so they leak in my ceilings. And I have to provide safe, fresh water to every cell for sinks and toilets. So that means a module that has 16 cells and can house 32 people has to be completely emptied out for 4 weeks while plumbers go in and do all their handiwork and replumb that one module. Then we can move those people back into that part of the building, take the next module, move them out. These 60 beds in the new part of the building will be part of that equation because a couple of my modules house 96 people. I can't put them all in a 32-person module, so I have to split that population and put some in an empty 32-person module and the rest in this 60-bed area. And so we are going to be doing a significant shuffle and dance of human beings between now and the end of the year, just to get the plumbing fixed. And I think on a prior slide you might have seen on there that then I get to build a kitchen. Because I have a kitchen that's 37 years old right in the middle of the jail that was designed to feed 270 people. And with our average daily population hovering around 440, it is beat up and tired and needs to be replaced. And all of the exterior plumbing under that kitchen has collapsed. I am relying right now on our good clay soil to be my pipe out of the jail because all of the physical piping has deteriorated over time. So we can't remodel that kitchen, so we're actually going to build a new structure on the northwest corner of the jail and add a hallway to it. Good news, it will be a very sustainable, all-electric, super modern, awesome kitchen attached to the least sustainable building that Boulder County owns. As far as the Pelley Center helping with my population, I alluded to that earlier. People who are currently sentenced can live in that building. So there are probably 15 people in my jail right now that eventually will make their way into this building, but it will not address my pretrial population. The 80+% that are, and 83 is a little bit off because right now I have 20 people waiting to go to the Department of Corrections, meaning they've been sentenced to prison time. They just haven't been moved from my building to their building. And that 20 people, once they're gone, that number will go back up to 87, 88% of my population will be pretrial. I have 42 people waiting to be seen at the state hospital because of the state of our mental health system and all of the challenges with competency in criminal justice proceedings. They sit and they wait in my facility. And you might wonder, how long are people supposed to stay in a county jail? So if you're sentenced, the maximum sentence should be no more than 2 years. If you are pretrial, you are subject to the court process. I have an individual in my jail who is charged with homicide, and it is not a whodunit, that has been in my jail for 5.5 years waiting to go to trial. And as part of that competency backlog and docket, it's an individual that knows the system well, knows when to fire his attorney, knows when to have a new attorney, raise competency. It becomes a shell game of where this person is in the process. But in the meantime, ultimately, my staff are responsible for taking care of them while we wait for the system to move that case forward. I mentioned the 20 awaiting Department of Corrections. Typically, they're pretty good about moving people, but people get sentenced in Boulder County on Thursdays and Fridays. It might be a week or two before we can get them moved to DOC, but there I'm subject to vacancies in the Department of Corrections. There's a cap. There are not endless beds in the state prison system. And sometimes they're very accommodating and helpful. If you were here when Michael Doherty presented about the King Soopers case, that case wrapped up that night. We had made arrangements with Department of Corrections to immediately transfer that individual to the state prison that day. And so when that case concluded after the sentencing hearing, That individual was directly driven to DOC. That was a favor. These are individuals who are waiting to serve their prison sentence, but in the meantime, until they have a vacancy at their end, they stay in mine. See if there's another slide there. Not sure if there is, like I said. Oh, that's my ask for after. We're getting close. So at the end of the day, I think you can appreciate the fact that the jail is a very expensive and very complicated building to run. Last year, I had to ask the county commissioners in October for $1.4 million to close out the year with my budget. Most of that cost has to do with medical care. I don't have an infirmary or a hospital in the jail. I am solely dependent on Boulder Community Health to help us out. I have one person at their hospital right now from the jail, which requires me to pay overtime for 2 deputies to be there. And those medical costs are incredibly high, as you can imagine. And some people, when you have lived the life of someone who ends up in jail, it can be a very hard life, and it can be a life that is very impactful on your health. And those costs come through my jail and are shared by our county taxes. The second big cost is food. Food costs have driven up consistently. I don't see that. I don't think we're serving eggs anymore. But there are basically 2 different meals that you can get in the jail, regular and kosher. Regular costs $2 a meal. Kosher costs $10 a meal. And you would have no idea how many people walk into the Boulder County Jail, and once they realize how much better a kosher meal is, they want to meet with the chaplain and talk about their pursuit of Judaism and sign up for kosher meals. But that's an unanticipated cost that is significantly higher when I'm paying $10 a meal. So it is a constant challenge. This building is the biggest stressor in my life. And we are working hard to make it better, but it is, I don't foresee this community saying, you know what, we should just stop and spend $500 million and build a new jail. And where in Boulder County would you build it? We're fortunate to have it where it is, although it's on an old landfill. It has a wonderful view. But it is near the airport. It's where people thought a jail could be 37 years ago. Now, that property is very valuable, but it's not enough for me to buy and build a new jail. My last pitch, a little charity plea. Special Olympics Colorado is a charity that law enforcement takes on all over the state. We do a torch run, we participate in the Special Olympics. This year, on April 5th, I'm going to go jump in Boulder Reservoir. Rain, snow, or shine, with a bunch of my team members to raise money for Special Olympics. And we are competing with our good friends at Boulder PD and Erie PD to raise money for Special Olympics. And if you have it in your heart, it's all over our social media. You can watch the video on April 6th. I'm sure it'll be there. But I will be barely clothed and in the water, whether it's frozen or not, because I believe in this organization and they're great to work with. And so that is my little side plea to you that if you're looking for charity to give to, or you want to support our team, or if you want to join me and come put on your trunks and run down the beach of Boulder Reservoir and hop in the lake, love to have you. With that, questions?
Great.
Sheriff Johnson, that building would add stress to anybody's life, the jail. So my question is, it sounds like in 2018, the voters approved kind of the tax money for capital expenditures to do the Pele Center and the jail expansion. But both of those, it seems to me, are going to add to your staffing needs, and you haven't touched on that. I mean, what are your staffing needs to get these new facilities up and running?
So let me give you a 2-part answer on staffing. First, when I became sheriff, we had about 25 vacancies in the jail for jail deputies, and by the end of this month, we will be down to like 3 vacancies, which that has been a commitment that we made to the jail staff because they were working a ton of overtime, sometimes not voluntarily. It was on call, you got to come in and work a shift. And to me, that's not healthy. That's not how you take care of people. That's not how you have people come to work with the right attitude to work in a facility like that. So our core staffing, we are almost fully staffed, which will be the first time in decades that we've been able to get there. And that's been a commitment of myself and my undersheriff to make that happen. With regards to the new buildings, so both buildings require a significant amount of staff. The alternative sentencing facility, I think it's somewhere between 50 and 60 people that need to run that facility, between programming, managing the facility, taking care of the people who are living there. The alternative sentencing facility, or Pelley Center, please keep that in my head, it's the Pelley Center. They submitted a budget request for the 2025 budget, and all of those positions were approved. At the same time, I submitted a request for 43 positions to staff those other 60 beds, because I need 24/7 jail deputies on 4 different shifts, supervisors, nurses, maintenance people, detention specialists who help run all the doors and make things work. And what I was told during the budget process is, we recognize your need, but we're not going to fund it until you're closer to being fully staffed and can actually fund these positions. To which I took some grace to, right? I don't expect to have $3 million put in my budget when I'm not going to spend it. This month, I met with the commissioners to start talking about adding those staff, even in small bites, knowing that the plumbing project is going to keep me from fully activating the space in my jail until I get all the plumbing fixed. But I got to start getting ahead of the curve, hiring and training people. Currently, they're still saying not yet. That'll be subject to a meeting in about, hopefully, early April to really work out a plan for how I can get staff going. Because we are having great momentum hiring people who want to work for the sheriff's office. And I don't want to lose that by not having positions funded. So it may be that I will have to take a little personnel hit on my budget early this year, hoping that I can get that back from the commissioners in a budget meeting later in the year. So we're lined up and ready. We know what we need. We just don't have the funds yet to make it happen. And that's, when people ask me what I love about my job, it's the fact that I'm an independently elected official and I can speak pretty freely. And I don't have to report to a city council or a mayor or any of those people. I get to run my office based on input from my community, but I am beholden to the county commissioners for budget. They control the purse strings for the county. And all 3 of them are not always aligned on supporting the work that statutorily I have to do in the jail and the other parts of my responsibilities.
Thank you so much. But on the subject of funding, are any of the changes taking place in Washington having any effect upon the law enforcement in Boulder?
So other than the stress and panic it's creating in our community, when you talk about federal funding and grants, so far we have had no impact. But I can tell you, 2 years ago we were awarded a grant through Congressman Negus's office to put up new alert and warning sirens in our community. Those, what you might previously know as tornado sirens. They're used for a lot of other things, but the technology was old. Congressman Negus's office pulled together funding for us. We got a little over $1 million to upgrade that whole system. We did an RFP late last year. We picked a vendor. We're ready to pull the trigger and start putting sirens in. And a memo comes out from Washington that says all grants are frozen. And then the next day a memo comes out and says, nope, just kidding, all grants aren't frozen. We'll talk about it. And we're in a state of flux. Right now we believe that funding will be available. We do get grant funding to support programming in the jail. Most of that is any of the federal funds feed through the state, so there's a layer of insulation at the state level before it comes to us. Haven't been impacted yet. There are some potential unintended or weird impacts. I met with the U.S. Forest Service a couple weeks ago. Right now, firefighters are safe. They're actually bringing on or returning positions for 6,000 seasonal firefighters. Those are individuals we depend on. But I met with the Forest Service law enforcement officers, and they have been told that they might be reassigned to the border for a period of time. And that means the one guy I have to patrol all the U.S. Forest Service land in Boulder County, and Larimer and Gilpin, that's his great human being, has no interest in immigration, has a lot of interest in protecting our wilderness, looking out for the landscape that we depend on in western part of Boulder County, might get told, hey, you get to go for 2 weeks to the border and work a stint down there, and then you can come back. So the big impact's not yet. I guess the challenge, besides the stress of the jail, I wake up every morning wondering what's next. And there's just not a lot of predictability at the federal level right now. We're hopeful that things will not impact law enforcement and firefighting, but nothing's for sure.
Obviously, your plate is full and overflowing, and yet you haven't mentioned the possibility of immigration impacting you. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so Boulder County's made it pretty clear, and the district attorney and all the police chiefs and myself are all aligned on the fact that we don't do immigration work. That is not our responsibility. That is the responsibility of the federal government. But we do know that individuals in our community have been contacted by ICE, individuals have been picked up. The challenge for me is there has been zero communication from the federal government about that. So there are federal law enforcement agencies operating in our community with no deconfliction or communication with the local agencies that are just trying to keep our communities safe. The other challenge, and this goes back to the jail, is the federal government and anyone in our community has access to all the information at the jail. It's a public facility. So if there is somebody that they are looking for that is living in that facility, they can find out. And if that person is released, they can pick them up. Impacts so far have not been hugely significant in our part of the community. But again, we wonder if they might target areas of our community that may have individuals that are not here with legal status. We just don't know.
I guess we don't have any time for more questions. Sorry, Marty. But I will quote you because I heard you say, talk less and say more, so I'm going to try to do that. Sheriff Curtis Johnson, the Rotary always, gives a response to the speaker, and I want to say personally thank you that, especially you stepped in within a week and presented an amazing talk, and you gave us a great appreciation for the challenges that you're facing. And I'm going to quote Max right here that says, you do an amazing job. And so we thank you. I mean, we're blessed to have you as our sheriff. As I was trying to think of, as you know, I got to craft my comments in such a lengthy period of time, maybe 20 minutes. And so I was thinking of two words that go back to the very first time I met you at the Parkway when you and Joe were having breakfast, and Dorothy Rupert introduced us, and all I can think of is you have effervescent enthusiasm, and so as I said, we're blessed. Now, one of the things that Rotary does is we, as you know, we donate 100 doses of polio vaccine, and we're trying to eradicate polio. So in appreciation for your talk today, we're going to put 100 doses of polio vaccine in your name. So thank you.
Thank you.